There were rows upon rows of people in the courtroom, and there was a palpable sense of expectation in the air as they sat in profound stillness. The room was illuminated by gentle overhead lights, casting a dull glow over the polished wooden benches at the front of the room. Judge Richard Holloway, an elderly man in his 60s with silver hair and deep wrinkles on his face from years of scowling at defendants, sat high on his bench, tapping his fingers impatiently on the desk before him. To him, this was just another mundane case, another name, another person wasting his time. Little did he know that today would be different, that the defendant sitting before him was more than just another, and that his hubris would cost him everything at the defense table. Judge Holloway paid her no mind as Danielle Carter sat composedly, her back straight and expression unreadable. She wore a sharp navy blue suit, and her black hair was neatly pulled back into a bun. If you're watching this today, please let us know in the comments. To him, Carter was just another black woman who had gotten herself into trouble. He looked down at the case, his grin expanding. Even though he hadn't heard her speak yet, he had already decided that this would be a breeze. He shook his head and emitted a little laugh, drawing attention to himself as he pondered the situation loudly enough for everyone in the courtroom to hear. A handful of the jurors moved uncomfortably as the prosecutor, a younger guy in his 30s, silently pursed his lips. Holloway glanced up at Danielle and asked, "Are you here to claim that you were wrongfully arrested and that this is all just a big misunderstanding?" While more laughter echoed through the room, Danielle's lips twisted into the faintest smile. Not a nervous one, but the smile of someone who knew something nobody else did. The prosecutor cleared his throat and fixed his tie, and the defendant was called upon. Mrs. Carter. Judge Holloway leant forward with amusement and interrupted, saying, "Let's not waste the court's time. Why don't you explain to me why you believe you're special?" Danielle finally spoke, her voice smooth and even with all due respect. "Your Honor, I'd prefer to stick to facts rather than opinions." Judge Holloway. Smirk faltered for the briefest second. He didn't like the way she held herself. Too composed, too unshaken. Most people in her position fumbled, stuttered, begged. But she sat there like she owned the room. "Facts." He echoed mockingly. "All right, Mrs. Carter. Here are the facts." Danielle exhaled slowly and reached into the inner pocket of her blazer. The bailiff instinctively stiffened. Judge Holloway scoffed, ready to make a comment about wreck behavior. But then she pulled out a small black leather case and flipped it open for a moment. The entire courtroom was silent inside. The case was a golden badge with bold, unmistakable letters engraved across it. Judge Holloway's face drained of color. The prosecutor's pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. A few jurors leaned forward, eyes wide in surprise. Danielle laid the badge on the table like a royal flush in a poker game. "My name," she stated, her voice steady and clear, "is Special Agent Danielle Carter, United States Secret Service." Judge Holloway's mouth clenched. He was stunned into silence. Danielle let that moment settle before continuing. "And before we continue any further, I think it's necessary to admit that my arrest was not only unwarranted, but also a direct violation of federal law." The judge swallowed hard. Danielle reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a sealed government document. "This," she said, sliding the folder toward the bailiff, "is an official complaint drafted by the Department of Justice. It details the numerous violations committed by the officers who arrested me, including the falsified report that made its way to this courtroom." Judge Holloway's hands gripped the edge of his desk so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "You see, Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "The officers who arrested me never bothered to check my credentials. Instead, said they assumed that because of the color of my skin, I must have been doing something wrong." The prosecutor's face was now a mix of shock and fear. He flipped through his own documents as if trying to piece together how he had missed this information. And now Danielle continued, "I find myself sitting in front of a judge who, instead of conducting a fair trial, mocked me." Before hearing a single piece of evidence, the weight of her words crushed the room. The courtroom was deathly silent. Judge Holloway looked like he had just aged 10 years. His arrogance had vanished, replaced with panic. Danielle straightened her blazer and looked the judge directly in the eye. "This isn't just about me," she said. "This is about a system that allows people in power to abuse their authority without question. But today, Judge Holloway, you question the wrong person." She leaned forward slightly. "And I promise you, this is far from over the prosecutor. Jumped up, Your Honor, in light of this new information. The prosecution requests that the charges against Miss Carter be immediately dropped." Judge Holloway's lips pushed into a narrow line. He looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. He cleared his throat. "Case dismissed." He muttered, the gavel slammed down. But for the first time,